It made me see how strong and capable I was. In certain ways, I did find it eventually to become empowering. It definitely taught me the importance of listening to your body, to your intuition. Even when you have doctors telling you certain things, advocate for yourself. I cannot stress that enough. Advocate for yourself.
Welcome back to Colitis Unfiltered. My name is Frank Tabering, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Jaime, who got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis at age 25 in Chicago, Illinois. Jaime, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's dive right into it. We're going to talk about colitis today, and colitis, mostly starts with symptoms. Going back for you, at age 25, what were the first symptoms that showed up? What indicated to you that there was something wrong?
Well, it's actually kind of a funny story. I had every symptom by the book, the abdominal pain, diarrhea, just you name it, the bloating, if it was on WebMD, I had it. And I actually, 8 months prior to getting diagnosed, I diagnosed myself on my lunch break at work, and I called my mom and I said, "Oh my gosh, I think I have ulcerative colitis." And she was like, "Oh, Jaime," like she thought I was being dramatic, right? And she was like, "If you actually think that, you need to go to the doctor and get that looked at." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm probably not going to do that because what if something's wrong?" And then I ended up getting a really bad reaction on my legs. And so they gave me a dose of prednisone where it's like, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 pack. And when I got down to the one, the rash flared up again. So they gave me another pack. And then I was really good. Like I felt good for months after that. And so I never went. I never went to the doctor. I later found out that prednisone was one of the only medications that worked really well for me. So I had a really interesting start to what I was feeling and then in a lot of denial about.
So you're probably the first person that I heard who actually self-diagnosed, colitis. Especially it's a complex disease. At least when I was diagnosed, that was the first time that I've ever heard of it. And I'm sure it was the same for you, but you picked up your knowledge from the internet, right?
Well, yeah, I had never heard of it. I just typed in my symptoms in Google and that came up. I had never heard of ulcerative colitis. I had heard of Crohn's, but I had never heard of ulcerative colitis prior to my WebMD search. And then when I actually got diagnosed with it was the first time that I really was like, oh, okay. And then, started hearing about other people having it and learning more about it. But it was completely foreign to me initially. And I didn't even go to the doctor then. Like I said, when I took that prednisone, I felt like I was on top of the world again. It was just the kick I needed to mask the symptoms at the time. And so I had gone to my hometown for this little festival, this Halloween festival they have every year. And I was 25 and I just turned 25 and hanging out with my friends and having fun on Friday night and felt totally fine. And then the next morning I woke up and I didn't think that I had had that much to drink, but I definitely was, cutting up and letting loose a little bit. So I thought, oh, maybe I did overdo it a little bit and thought I was hungover. And as the day went on, I felt worse and worse and worse and tried to eat, and that made me feel even more sick. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I must have the flu. I was teaching second grade at the time, and it was end of October. So, we're starting to get into cold and flu season, and a lot of my kids were sick. And so I thought, oh, I must have what's going around with my students. So by about Wednesday, I was like, I don't actually think this is the flu. Every day I'm feeling worse instead of better. I better call the doctor. And so I did, and they did some blood work. And of course, my white blood cell count was outrageous. And my my doctor said, I want you to go in and see this GI. And so I had to wait almost another week. I finally get into the GI, and he's an older gentleman, and he tells me, he asked me what my symptoms are, and I kind of fibbed about them because I was raised very like, girls don't talk about those things, you don't share. And he said, your symptoms don't seem real severe, but you look like you don't feel that well. I think he kind of like knew I was embarrassed, to be totally honest, about what was really happening. And he said, you have to have a colonoscopy. And I started laughing. I was 25 years old. I started laughing. I said, no, cancer patients and old men have colonoscopies, not me. I'm young, I'm healthy. Like, no. And he said, well, cancer patients, old men, and you have colonoscopies now. I said, okay. So I called my parents and told them what was going on, because of course they're worried sick. They live like 5 hours away from me at the time. My mother's really worried, like, what's going on with you? So they came up because I needed a driver for my colonoscopy, my first of many colonoscopies. And I had a huge phobia of needles at the time, like a full-on panic attack getting my first IV, which is important too a little later. And, my dad's upset watching this all go down. He starts to get choked up. He has to leave. My mom like puts on the mother warrior face, like, you just have to do this. You have to get through this. We have to find out what's going on. So I have my colonoscopy, and my doctor, my GI comes out, and he tells me, I don't know how you've been living like this. You are the worst I have ever seen undiagnosed in my entire career. It is the damage from the ulcerative colitis is all the way through your entire colon already. And he slid a Valium script across the table to me. And he said, get this filled. You're going to need it because you have a lot more needles coming your way. Because he witnessed my IV meltdown. Now I can take a shot, get an IV with no problems. I've come a long way, but that was like my biggest medical fear at the time, which is just so hysterical to me now because I've been through so much, and I've had so much trauma since, that it's just like, I look at myself like, oh, that poor girl, she had no idea, no idea what was coming in the next year. But yeah, that's how it started, and it just got a little crazier from there.
That's great. And we're going to get to there. I got to tell you, it's been 12 years now that I've been diagnosed. I was 29, but still to this day, I can't with the needles. So I still load up on glucose every infusion I have with for my biologics, just to make sure my body doesn't trick me into want to faint. And so I can definitely relate to that part. So obviously, by the time you saw this GI and by the time you got officially diagnosed, at least you heard of colitis at that point. But hearing an official diagnosis, hearing somebody say that the condition of your intestines is very dramatic, for the lack of a better word, what went through your mind when he said that?
In one sense, I was relieved that I had a diagnosis and a care plan set in place. I'm very results driven, but I was probably in a little bit of denial / didn't fully understand what was coming or what that meant for me. I didn't fully understand how sick I was. I don't even know if I processed how truly sick I was until well after I would say through it, after my surgeries and stuff, and I remember multiple people telling me well, at least you don't have cancer, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, you're comparing apples and oranges here a little bit, it's like, that was always a confusing reaction or response for me. And I never knew what to say to it, or you would get things like, oh, wow, I need to get what you have so I can lose the last baby weight, or, people people just say these like really wild things to you, and I think a lot because they don't know what to say, but you're trying to process what you're going through and understand it, and then you have people saying these ridiculous things to you even though they mean well. It's an interesting place to sit at.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For sure. So you kind of gave it away. That diagnosis obviously was not the end of your IBD journey. You mentioned surgeries. That's eventually where you ended up. Can you basically take us through the timeline between your diagnosis and then where you are today? Did your GI start you off with just 5-ASAs, prednisone, biologics? Did he tell you, listen, the damage is so bad that we'll have to go to surgery right away? What was that path like from then to where you ended up surgery?
So we're into November now. That was October. We're into November now. And he said, there's this great drug I'm going to put you on and it should work. And it was Azicol. And I took it for about 3 days and I thought, wow, like I'm getting so much relief. And then I got hospitalized. I got way worse. I was in the hospital for like 4 or 5 days, getting back on my feet and feeling good again from the IV antibiotics. And they released me and they put me on Lialda. And same thing happened. I was on it for like 3-4 days and then got hospitalized again, spent Thanksgiving in the hospital. And they realized that I probably had a mesalamine allergy and that drug wasn't going to work. And they just pumped up the prednisone. So the GI issues actually I felt pretty good. And I went on a really strict diet. And, at one point I was up to like 70 milligrams a day or something like that of prednisone. It was a lot. So it's like my belly's feeling great, but you're getting joint pain. You're not sleeping well. My face, I was so thin from being sick, but my face looked like you put a pin in and I would just like pop like a balloon, you know? And then I just kept having flares. Then it got to a point where the prednisone wasn't really working anymore. And my doctor was like, we can't put you on more prednisone. You're like maxing out at this point. So we started Remicade and it was working really well for a while or so, I thought. And then it seemed like my symptoms were starting to flare up again. So along with the Remicade, he went old school and prescribed me sulfur drugs around June of that year. And I thought I was doing really well. And I had gone back home to visit my parents again. And I woke up one morning and I called my mom at work and I said, you have to come home. Like something is severely wrong. And my parents live in Southern Illinois, so I was about 5-6 hours away from my doctor. So I called because there was no way I was going to be able to ride in the car for that long. And so I called my doctor. I said, I'm 6 hours away. What do I do? And he said, go to St. Louis. So we load up in the car, we go there. I stayed there for 4 or 5 nights, and I basically begged them to let me out and let me go home because I had been waiting to get into this doctor actually in Chicago. I was out in the suburbs and I had an appointment that I'd been calling to try to see this doctor and get in. And I said, I have this appointment coming up. Will you please let me go so that I can go to this appointment? And they released me from the hospital and said, yes, that's actually a better place for you to be. If you can get in there, that's great. And so they released me the next day and I went straight from the hospital to my doctor and told him what was going on. And I got a lovely rush hour ambulance ride from my doctor out in the suburbs to the hospital in the city that I was trying to get into and was supposed to go to the following week. And they admitted me into the hospital. And I got a lovely 31-day stay after that. about the entire month of August and some of September in this hospital where I was no longer eating. I was being fed by IV. I got my 6th colonoscopy in 1 year with a nice display. You know, it was a teaching hospital also, so I had like 6 med students, a fellow, the doctor, had a whole audience for that. It was wonderful. And I got a little bout of C. diff on my hospital stay and had an accident getting tangled up in my wires trying to get out of bed in front of like 6 people in my room. And so I had an MRI trying to figure out, make sure it's not Crohn's, figure out what to do with me. During my MRI, they did like a whole ink contrast thing, and my IV blew out. Ink went all over my face, in my hair, while I was in the tube. Like, it was just rough. Yeah. And so my doctor came and talked to me on a Friday, and he said, these are your options. I'm going to think about it over the weekend. One of them being cyclosporine or surgery. My doctor said, I'm going to think about you over the weekend. Let's talk on Monday. So he comes back on Monday. He sits down on my bed, and he's just the loveliest man. Gentle, soft-spoken, extremely caring, just excellent bedside manner. And he puts his hand on my leg as I'm laying there withering away. And he says, I've thought about you all weekend, nonstop. And I think the best option is surgery. And if you want to try the other things, I can try to get you into a case study. I can, I'll do the cyclosporine for you, but I really think that surgery is where we need to go. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. Um, that was my worst fear, my biggest fear come true. Before I had gone to that doctor, like when this all started, my sister had gone to an appointment with me and with my original GI, and we'd gone through like, what's the worst case scenario? And of course, at that time, that surgery was it. And my sister laughed, just kind of speaking in hyperbole and being silly, said to me, oh my God, Jaime, if you end up with a bag, you'll never get another date again, And of course, like, we didn't fully understand what that was. And she was just kind of being like a silly big sister or whatever. Like, and we never thought it would get to that either. But of course, now I'm laying there in that bed and I'm 25 and single and I'm terrified. And that's all I can hear is her voice in my head. And of course, when she found out that was what was happening, she called me. She said, I instantly thought of that and I'm so sorry and I didn't mean it and it's not true. And I think the guilt was pretty high for her. And also I knew the side effects of how that could impact like fertility or ability to, conceive. And so that's racing through my mind at the time. I had always really wanted to be a mother. And so it's including all of those fears. And my parents at that time were taking turns staying in the hospital with me. And so my dad was with me that day. After the doctor left, he just sat down on my bed, on my hospital bed, and he said, we'll just cry together. And that's what we did. And I didn't know that day that was going to be the best thing that ever happened to me, but it really was. It saved my life and it gave me my life back. But it was really, really scary in the moment.
Yeah, I can imagine. And what a journey, by the way. I mean, you basically covered a period of 1.5 years and going through so much. It sounds like you were basically on the edge nonstop, right? Between periods of feeling okay, but then again landing in the hospital. So it was a back and forth. Now, after all of this, today, how are you feeling? And I think you have a J pouch now, right? So tell me, what is life like with that, and how are you feeling?
They did it in a 3-step process because I was so sick. And so, and the in the first surgery, they removed my colon and created an ileostomy. And so I still had to be really careful about what I was eating and letting that heal, and learning how to take care of my ostomy. And, it's shocking to see your stoma for the first few times and all of that. So that all happened in that August, September timeframe. And then in the following April of 2010, they removed the rectum, created a J pouch and a loop ostomy. And again, I had to go back to the strict diet and letting it heal. But during that time, I wasn't taking any medication, just vitamins, and just kind of letting my body, focusing on gaining weight, letting my body heal, and making sure that I was strong enough for each step. And a lot of doctor's appointments, a lot of tears still. And then in July 2010, I had my ostomy takedown. And since then, I haven't been on medication other than, I've had some bouts of pouchitis here and there, and you take antibiotics for it. But I have really learned my body. I've learned how to take care of myself, and how to monitor a lot with diet. And I just keep saying it, but it saved my life. It gave me my life back. I mean, I can even eat, obviously in moderation, but salad, nuts, popcorn doesn't bother me. Like, I am just so incredibly lucky to wake up most days and feel really good. You have to factor in dehydration. That's an issue with a pouch. And so monitoring that, I was able to have children. I had two. The first one, I had to work with a fertility doctor, and we did 4 rounds of IUI to conceive him. And the hormones from pregnancy and postpartum definitely have had an impact. And I have kind of been in this state of chronic inflammation since then with my pouch that I'm still currently working through. I just had another baby in January. She was a surprise, but a wonderful blessing. We just didn't think that was an option for us after everything we had gone through to conceive our son. And so, we're kind of back with the stress that puts on your body and the hormone changes and everything, where, I'm working with my current GI on trying to figure out what the best plan of action is to kind of reel that back in. And for pouchitis, it's Cipro used to be my go-to, and that's kind of run its course, where I started having more negative side effects than the benefits. And so we've moved on to other things, like, we've done the rectal foams and the suppositories and all the other fun things and medications that come with the trade-off, but we're figuring it out. And I also take a probiotic every day that I have found to be really helpful.
So happy ending, more or less, regardless, based on what you went. And I want to, before we move on, I want to very quickly go back. So a lot of people, or most people, are familiar with ostomy, but today you have a J pouch. You and I were not doctors, but could you very briefly explain to our audience this concept of a J pouch versus an ostomy?
Sure. So an ostomy is what most people are familiar with. It's a bag on the outside of your body that you use for exit, I guess. Is that the polite way to say it? um, and then a J pouch is basically that internally. So you don't have the medical devices and the actual physical bag. They take the first part of your small bowel and they create what they call a J pouch, and essentially create a new rectum or reservoir for you. They have to leave a small cuff of your rectum because they need something to stitch or staple to. And then you just learn how to reuse your body again, which can be an interesting experience. You go traditionally the way you would have before having the external bag, but you have to change your expectations a bit. It's not the way you remember it before your before your colon is removed. But Imodium can be your best friend, helps, and just making sure that you're watching your diet in different ways than you did with a UC flare. So I had to watch my diet to not irritate the ulcers. Now I watch my diet to make sure that I'm not dehydrating myself and flushing my system, because you don't have all the things in your colon you need to make your output more formed, and you're missing the key bacterias and all the good things that are in the colon. And so it's a lot of carb loading. It's a lot of, it helps to avoid foods that do create more gas, drinking through a straw, even though I personally choose to still use straws and do some of those things, knowing the consequences or knowing how to balance it. And a lot of it is just learning your body after that. So for me, I avoid caffeine, because I know that's just an unnecessary obstacle for me. But then, like I said, I'll have salad or popcorn, knowing that I might have to balance that out a little bit later with eating a sandwich, or I can't even tell you I've probably eaten my weight plus some pretzels over the last 15 years. That's just a really easy, quick go-to food or snack for me when I know that I need to thicken up output and get myself back on track.
So a lot of trade-offs, and I think the message here is clear, because there's a general misconception around surgery, around ostomy, and I think also J-pouch, that hey, they take the colon out and I am cured, right? However, in a way, yes, but in another way, no. So based on what I'm hearing here, yes, you feel much better. Yes, you have had a lot more blessings coming your way ever since you've had the surgeries. However, your IBD journey does not end there, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a trade-off, but I would choose this compared to how I was living or not living prior to surgery every single time. And it's just so much about educating yourself and understanding your body, learning your cues, knowing how to take care of yourself so that it doesn't get away from you. And I have personally found it to be so much more manageable than what life was like with active UC. Now, that's not to say that there was not a learning curve, because there definitely was. And it was not an easy transition physically or emotionally, going through having the bag and even transitioning from not having the external bag anymore and going to the J pouch. And like I said, learning how to use your body again, and like being paranoid about not having an accident. Or when I had the bag, I would constantly ask my friends, like, I was so insecure that I was worried, like, that you could smell it or that you could see it. And also at that time, there was not the positivity around having an ostomy or being open talking about these things like there is now. Like, I get on Instagram now and I see these girls in their swimsuits, in these adorable outfits with their bag out, and I just think, like, it's so awesome. It's so inspiring, and I just was not in that place, and I didn't have anyone to look to when I was in that place in my journey to, like, inspire me.
In connection to this, you mentioned that one of the good things that came out of this entire ordeal that you went through is that you learned a lot more about your body. You're a lot more conscious about your health. I always refer to it as a blessing and a curse, right? There's bad when we are at our worst, and then when we get better, either through surgery, through remission, there's a lot of good that comes from it. In your case, how do you relate to that thought of it being a blessing and a curse? And also your journey, how has it changed you as a person fundamentally?
As far as the curse, that's pretty obvious. It's a rough journey, so, it's self-explanatory. The blessing, though, I think it made me see how strong and capable I was in certain ways. I did find it eventually to become empowering. It definitely taught me the importance of listening to your body, to your intuition, Even when you have doctors telling you certain things, advocate for yourself. I cannot stress that enough. Advocate for yourself. If you feel something is wrong, something is off, because I had my main doctors, I had really incredible care, but I've met ER doctors along the way when I've been when I've had a bump along the way on a weekend or in the middle of the night or whatever, or an urgent care doctor that advocate for yourself and feel strong in your voice and share your story, because it's not something to be embarrassed of or feel shame about. It's unfortunately a very common issue for a lot more people than we realize, and I think it's so important that we stick together and we support each other, and there's just so much healing in that. And I think that's some of the blessing is the community that you can find in it, that you don't have to suffer alone.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. This is exactly my main point as well. I always say, put your foot down, speak up for yourselves. Not every doctor is equal. Not every doctor, not even every GI is a colitis, Crohn's, or IBD specialist. You need somebody who is proactive. And if you feel that they're not proactive enough, just be relentless, because somebody out there will listen to you. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to sort of be pair matched with that person, that GI that really, works in your favor. But I think more commonly what I'm seeing is Crohn's and colitis. This is not something that you want to lose time over because of a lack of proactivity from a physician, right? I mean, we just don't have that time to waste sometimes. So, to paraphrase your words, speak up. Absolutely. I think this is like one of the most crucial things. Yeah, absolutely. So you've learned a lot during these turbulent years. If you could go back now to when you first diagnosed, what are some of the things that you wish you had known back then that you've picked up along your journey?
It's bad or it's hard, but it's not as awful or as scary as I thought. I think especially around the surgery piece, to not hide away in my room or feel sorry for myself or feel sad. Like I missed out on opportunities with my friends when, maybe I should have gone ahead and gone to dinner and just not eaten, or just, enjoyed the being with my friends aspect of it instead of completely sitting at home alone while they were all out making memories together. It's like, don't stop living your life because of it. Don't hide away at home. And, sometimes we have to hide away at home, and we can't go too far from the bathroom. And some days are just like that, and that's okay. But the days that are not like that, don't continue to hide away. If there's something you want to do, people you want to see, memories you want to make, an adventure you want to go on, do it. Don't let it stop you. It's not a death sentence. You don't have to hide away. I wish when I first started feeling some of these things and instinctually knew that something was off, that I would have sought help then. And the journey still would have been hard, but maybe it didn't have to be as hard as mine was, because I was so sick by the time that I got diagnosed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no shame in heading to the doctor or the urgent care or emergency room right away. So these are all very valuable tips, and thank you for sharing that. Now, one of the reasons why I started this podcast is to, first of all, raise awareness, but also sort of build out a platform for people who have questions, who might feel alone, who don't have all the answers, who might be embarrassed to ask their doctor, friends, and family. And you are also doing your part. And in your case, you told me you released a journal and a guide titled Rooted and Resilient, that could be beneficial to people who were recently diagnosed. Can you tell us a little bit more about Rooted and Resilient, where the idea come from and what it is exactly and how it can benefit people with IBD?
Sure. I always had a goal of writing a book. That was the original plan. I wanted to write a book kind of like a memoir of my journey because I was so lonely going through my journey. And at that time, the only thing I could find was medical journals, articles, and there wasn't anything out there that was just like, hey, this sucks, but like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You can do this, you can get through this. You're not alone, you're not the only one going through it. Just that isolation that I felt. And so I did start writing a book, just kind of as my own therapy. And then I decided I didn't actually want to share it because by the time I got to a point where I felt like it was potentially ready or could be shared, I wasn't that person anymore. I had come so far and I had healed so much that when I read it, I felt really sorry for that girl when I reread it because I had grown so much and I had come so far in my journey, and I felt like she was just a little too sad to release on the world, you know? Um, and so I took the important pieces of that and instead I shifted it and tried to turn it into more of a guide and a journal or resource that I wish I had on my journey to make it easier. And so, there's some food ideas in there, and there's a section on if you do end up with an ostomy, how to hide or dress for it if you're someone who is in a place like I was that wasn't ready to show it to the world yet. And I think that's super awesome for the people who do, and I wish that I had that inspiration when I was going through it, but I also know how I personally felt about mine. So for anyone who hasn't arrived to that boldness and that empowerment yet, here's some tips and tricks that I found to help me along the way as I was learning to love it and appreciate my ostomy and this new version of myself. So that's in there. And then a big chunk of it is the journal section, which has a BM tracker on it, a place for you to write down your meals and track your medications. And I try to include a large mental health piece. So a place to write an affirmation every day and focus on like, what are you doing for yourself to make yourself feel better, whether that's physically, emotionally, spiritually. What is something that triggered you today? Maybe emotionally triggered you and caused stress, or maybe it was a physical trigger symptom. And then a place for what brought you joy today, because I think it's so important to have that gratitude and highlight even when you are like, I need to go to bed, I need this day to be over, this day straight up just sucked. It's very important to not get sucked into that and find the small joys in the day, even if it's just that you got out of bed today. If that is the only thing that you were able to accomplish that day, that's worth celebrating. It's a big deal, or you left the house, you went on an errand by yourself, depending on where you're at in your journey, or, maybe you went to a concert you really wanted to go to. Whatever it is, that's your joy or your accomplishment for that day. I think it's really important to highlight that and celebrate that. And that looks different for everybody, and that's okay. So that's the goal. And I've told my friends and family when I wrote it that, if it only reaches one person but it helps them, then I'm happy with that.
That's exactly the attitude to have, and I gotta tell you, which is great, and I hope it will continue to reach a lot of people. And I now hearing you talk about it, I wish I had something like that, because when I go back, this was in 2013. Basically, my journal consists of just email exchanges between me and my medical team, and most of them are just very depressing. So, and so basically my good moments or the small wins, the small victories that you touched on, I mean, they're luckily stored in my memory as best as I can remember them, but this is a great initiative. And where can people find this, purchase this?
It's on Amazon. Well, the original, and then if you like the journal pages, there's a companion guide that's really just the journal. There's a little bit of other stuff in it, but it's really focused on just the journal pages. And it's 3 months instead of 1 month. so that's not too overwhelming. But yeah, they're both listed on there, and please feel free to check them out. I hope it helps someone. That's really the goal.
Absolutely. And we will put the link to both of those editions in the show notes as well for ease of use. So Jaime, I want to thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your journey. I really do admire your resilience, especially through those years of hospital stays and flares and uncertainty. I wish you nothing but the best moving forward with your J-pouch and with your family and all the blessings that you've sort of picked up during your journey. And I want to just thank you again for being here with us today.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
That's it for today's episode of Colitis Unfiltered. I'm Frank Tabering, and if this hit home or hit your gut, do us a favor, subscribe to the show, and follow us at Colitis Unfiltered on YouTube, Substack, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and Reddit. We'll see you soon for more inspiring stories from the bathroom floor.